Welcome to relationship psychology. Most men try to make a woman miss them by doing more. More messages, more attention, more availability, more explanations. They believe that constant presence builds attachment, but psychology and real-life patterns prove the opposite. A constant presence often makes you easier to ignore, not harder to forget. A person starts missing you not because of what you give, but because of the void your absence creates. And here's the uncomfortable truth. A woman doesn't begin missing you when you prove your worth. She begins missing you when your absence reveals it. That's why some men can do everything right, be attentive, emotionally available, and still feel completely invisible. Meanwhile, another man who does far less lingers in her mind long after he's gone. It's not magic, it's emotional contrast. The human brain adapts quickly to what's constant. When something is always available, it fades into background noise. But when something meaningful disappears, attention sharpens, memory activates, and curiosity surges. Stoicism has a principle that fits perfectly here. Control what you offer, not what you receive. A stoic man doesn't try to control her feelings. He focuses on becoming someone whose presence carries weight and whose absence creates silence she notices. This isn't manipulation, it's alignment. If she isn't interested right now, chasing won't spark desire. Pressure doesn't produce attraction, it produces resistance. But shifting your energy, your availability, and your emotional center can change how you're perceived, because people don't miss those who orbit around them, they miss those who move forward. Another key point most men overlook. Making someone miss you isn't about sadness, it's about mental occupation. When she starts wondering what you're doing, who you're with, why you stopped reaching out, or whether she misjudged you, that's when you've entered her inner world. You didn't force your way in. You created space for curiosity, and curiosity is powerful. It keeps pulling her mind back to the same person, over and over, trying to resolve the uncertainty. In this video, we're not talking about childish games or dramatic disappearances. We're talking about psychological shifts that make your presence valuable and your absence felt, even by someone who didn't see you that way at first. Attraction can be ignited by mystery, strengthened by respect, and amplified by absence, but only when that absence comes from strength, not hurt. So the real question isn't, how can I make her miss me? The real question is, how do you become someone whose absence feels different from everyone else's? In the sections ahead, we'll break down the behaviors, mindset shifts, and emotional signals that create this effect, without begging, without chasing, without losing your dignity. Because the man who gets missed isn't the one who tried the hardest. It's the man who stays centered enough to walk away without bitterness and interesting enough to be remembered. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below saying, "I'm subscribed." Let's get started. Part 1. Disappear from her emotional comfort zone, not from her life. Most men misunderstand absence. They think making a woman miss them means vanishing completely. No replies, no trace, no presence. But disappearing without emotional context doesn't create longing. It ends everything. You don't become missed. She assumes you moved on, lost interest, or were never serious. The emotional door closes quietly, and your absence becomes irrelevant. What truly creates longing is far more subtle. Remove the comfort she found in your attention while still existing as a person. If she knew she could message you anytime and get an instant reply, that comfort vanishes. If she knew you were always available, that certainty dissolves. But you don't disappear as a human being. You simply stop being emotionally predictable. This is a psychological shift, not a tactic. Human attachment forms around reliable emotional rewards. When those rewards stop appearing automatically, the brain doesn't detach instantly. It searches for the pattern. It wonders what changed. It replays interactions. It scans for signals. That mental loop is the beginning of missing someone. A stoic man doesn't withdraw out of hurt or anger. He withdraws because his attention is valuable, and he doesn't offer it endlessly without reciprocity. He recenters his life around his purpose, not her response. From her perspective, something feels different. You're still out there in the world, but you no longer orbit her. You don't react to everything. You don't fill every silence. You don't provide constant emotional soothing. This removal from her emotional comfort zone forces awareness. She might start checking your activity, wondering what you're up to, questioning whether she misread your interest. Curiosity replaces certainty, and certainty is the enemy of longing. Many men sabotage this phase by reappearing with intensity. They vanish briefly, then flood back with paragraphs, confessions, or explanations. That kills the effect instantly because it restores predictability. The Stoic approach is consistency, not drama. You don't punish. You don't announce distance. You simply become less available to her emotional needs while becoming more available to your own life. And that matters deeply. People miss those who move forward, not those who seem frozen in waiting. Movement signals value. Waiting signals dependency. If she sees you thriving, engaged, balanced, purposeful, not performatively, but authentically, your absence becomes intriguing rather than forgettable. Psychologically, humans are drawn to what feels rare but meaningful. When the attention of someone who once gave it freely becomes selective, its perceived value skyrockets. You're not just missed physically, you're missed for how you made her feel, seen, desired, prioritized. When that emotional input stops, she becomes aware of its absence. But this only works if your withdrawal is authentic. If you're secretly checking your phone every 5 minutes, monitoring her activity, or hoping for a reaction, your energy becomes tense and inconsistent. A stoic man withdraws with purpose, not anxiety, because the goal isn't to manipulate her into missing you. The goal is to stop overinvesting in someone who doesn't meet you halfway and let natural psychological dynamics unfold. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop trying to be missed is often the moment she starts. Part 2. Become unpredictable in availability, not in character. One of the fastest ways to become forgettable is emotional predictability. Not stability, but predictability. There's a crucial difference. A stable man is grounded, calm, consistent in his values. A predictable man is always available, always responsive, always there on demand. When a woman knows exactly when and how you'll show up, your presence loses psychological impact. You become background noise in her life, comforting, maybe even appreciated, but not captivating. Making someone miss you requires interrupting the pattern. If she messages and you always reply instantly, there's no anticipation. If she calls and you always answer, there's no uncertainty. If she knows you're waiting, there's no tension. And tension, not anxiety, but emotional tension, is what keeps someone mentally engaged. This doesn't mean playing games or deliberately ignoring messages. It means having a real life that sometimes takes priority over an immediate response. Work, goals, social circle, hobbies, solitude, things that make your attention selective rather than automatic. The Stoic man doesn't become unpredictable in his integrity. He stays respectful, calm, and consistent in tone. What changes is access. Access is earned, not assumed. Psychologically, intermittent availability increases perceived value. When attention isn't guaranteed, the brain assigns it more importance. That's why people remember interactions that feel special rather than constant. If she can't predict when you'll reply or how long you'll stay engaged, she starts thinking about you outside the direct interaction. She wonders what you're doing, who you're with, why you're occupied. That questioning is mental investment. Most men ruin this by swinging between extremes, either hyper-available or suddenly cold and distant. Both are unattractive because both signal emotional imbalance. The Stoic approach is moderation. You respond when it makes sense, not when anxiety demands it. You engage fully when present, then return to your life without clinging. Conversations end naturally without being stretched to avoid silence. Another key element is emotional unpredictability in tone, not volatility, but depth. If every conversation feels identical, there's no novelty. But if you bring humor one time, thoughtful insight another, light teasing the next, you become mentally stimulating. Humans miss what stimulates them, not what constantly soothes them. But here's the deeper layer. Unpredictability only works when it's rooted in self-respect. If your availability changes because you're living fully, it feels attractive. If it changes because you're trying to provoke a reaction, it feels manipulative. Women are highly sensitive to intention. They may not articulate it, but they feel the difference. A man with purpose doesn't plan his life around her replies. He invites her into his world rather than positioning himself in hers. And when she senses your time isn't unlimited, your presence regains meaning, not because you withdrew affection, but because you stopped offering it without limit. Missing someone isn't just about absence. It's about realizing their presence was never guaranteed. Part 3. Leave every interaction slightly unfinished. Most men try to maximize every conversation. They stay too long, say too much, explain everything, drain every drop of attention until the interaction fades from exhaustion. It feels satisfying in the moment, but psychologically it makes you easier to forget. Human memory doesn't hold completed experiences as strongly as unfinished ones. There's a well-documented psychological principle, often called the Zeigarnik effect. The brain keeps returning to things that feel incomplete. This applies powerfully to attraction. When an interaction ends while it still feels positive, engaging, or emotionally warm, the mind keeps replaying it. The conversation feels alive, not concluded. She wonders what you would have said next. She anticipates the next one. That anticipation is a form of longing. A stoic man understands timing. He doesn't cling to the moment. He withdraws calmly, without excuses, without drama, without stretching things until they become boring. Maybe the conversation is fun, and he says he has to get back to something. Maybe the date is going well, and he leaves on a high note instead of staying until the energy dips. Maybe the texts are flowing, and he signs off while the vibe is still warm. From her perspective, this differs from most interactions. Instead of feeling drained or saturated, she feels slightly unsatisfied, not negatively, but curiously. The connection feels paused, not finished. Curiosity keeps the attention alive. Most men sabotage this because they fear losing momentum. They think if they don't stay engaged constantly, she'll forget them. In reality, constant engagement often numbs emotional response. Scarcity sharpens it. Another important detail: leaving early signals independence. It shows your life doesn't revolve around the interaction. You choose to engage, you don't cling to it. That subtle confidence raises perceived value. Psychologically, people value what feels self-directed rather than needy. When you can walk away without anxiety, it communicates emotional stability. But this only works if your exit feels natural. If you manufacture excuses or vanish abruptly, it creates confusion instead of intrigue. The Stoic approach is honesty without over-explaining. You have things to do, places to be, a life to live. Over time, this pattern builds a mental association. Interactions with you are energizing, not exhausting. She starts looking forward to them, and when they don't happen, she notices the absence more strongly. Missing someone isn't just wanting their presence, it's wanting what they made you feel: energized, seen, challenged, amused, understood. If every interaction ends in emotional saturation, there's nothing left to crave. But if every interaction leaves a trace of what's coming next, her mind fills the gap herself, and what the mind fills, it revisits. Part 4. Stop trying to convince her and start living without her approval. Nothing makes a man more forgettable than when his energy feels like persuasion. Not obvious begging, but subtle attempts to convince, trying to prove he's interesting, valuable, worthy, fun, different. It often looks like effort, but emotionally it registers as insecurity. When you try to convince someone to like you, your attention turns outward. You monitor her reactions. You adjust your behavior, you soften your opinions, you explain more. Your center shifts from self-direction to approval-seeking, and attraction collapses, because missing someone requires them to feel solid, not adjustable. A Stoic man doesn't try to win affection through argument, explanation, or performance. He shows up honestly and lets the reaction happen. If she isn't interested, he doesn't double down to compensate. He redirects his energy to his own life. From her perspective, this is deeply disorienting in a powerful way. She expected to be chased, not met with self-assured withdrawal. Most people are used to being convinced. When someone stops trying, it forces reevaluation. She might start wondering, did I misjudge him? Why isn't he trying harder? Is he losing interest? What is he focusing on now? Those questions pull her attention inward. She starts thinking about you without you soliciting it. Psychologically, people value what feels self-sufficient. When someone seems complete without needing validation, their presence is stable and intriguing. When they seem to need approval, they become predictable and easy to ignore. Many men sabotage this phase by re-engaging emotionally the moment she shows curiosity. They interpret any attention as a signal to resume persuasion, but that reintroduces the dynamic she already rejected. The Stoic approach is calm consistency. You're not cold, not hostile, not bitter. You simply stop chasing validation. Another layer is authenticity. When you stop trying to impress, your real personality emerges. Humor, opinions, boundaries, quirks, passion. Authenticity is memorable. Performance is generic. Think of the people you remember most. They weren't trying to be loved by everyone. They had a clear sense of self. That clarity creates an emotional imprint. A woman might not have been interested at first because she only saw the version of you trying to please. When that version disappears, she meets the unfiltered one, and that version is often far more captivating. But this shift must be real. If you secretly crave approval while pretending not to, the tension shows. True detachment comes from redirecting your energy toward goals, friendships, growth, experiences, things that make your life full regardless of her response. When your world expands, emotional dependency shrinks, and that independence is magnetic. Missing someone isn't about how much you cared. It's about how irreplaceable you seemed. And nothing feels more irreplaceable than someone who didn't need your approval to exist with confidence. Part 5. Build a life that feels alive without her. This is the step most men resist because it has nothing to do with tactics and everything to do with identity. You can't manufacture longing if your life feels empty the moment she's not part of it. When a woman senses she's your primary source of excitement, meaning, or emotional stimulation, the connection becomes heavy, not because she doesn't like you, but because no one wants to feel responsible for someone else's entire happiness. But when your life is genuinely full, something shifts. You have goals that light you up, people who value you, activities that occupy your mind and body, moments of solitude that feel peaceful rather than lonely. From her perspective, you become someone participating in life instead of waiting for it. And here's the paradox. The less your world revolves around her, the more space she has to approach you voluntarily. Psychologically, humans are drawn to vitality. Energy attracts energy. When someone seems animated by their own existence, curious, driven, engaged, they become worth thinking about even in absence. A stoic man doesn't withdraw into isolation to prove a point. He thrives in his life. He invests in things that would matter whether she returns or not. That authenticity creates emotional gravity. Many men try to fake this by constantly posting, trying to show they're busy or having fun. But forced visibility feels performative. True vitality doesn't need advertising. It shows in tone, presence, and consistency over time. If she hears about your progress through conversations or mutual circles, if she notices your calm confidence, if she senses you're moving forward without bitterness, this triggers a powerful psychological response: reevaluation. She starts comparing the version of you she dismissed with the version she sees now. Growth changes perception. What once seemed ordinary can become captivating after a period of absence. Another crucial factor is emotional contrast. If interactions with you were calm, fun, and grounding, and now she experiences life without that energy, she notices the absence more sharply. People rarely miss chaos. They miss calm. If your presence made her feel relaxed, understood, positively challenged, or simply lighter, that emotional memory lingers. When your energy is gone, she searches for it elsewhere and often realizes how rare it was. But this only happens if your life isn't centered on proving something to her. It must be centered on becoming fully yourself. The Stoic mindset here is powerful. Focus on what you control: your actions, your direction, your growth. Release what you can't control: her feelings, the timing, her decisions. Ironically, that letting go creates the conditions for attraction to re-emerge, because the man who lives fully without needing her approval isn't trying to be missed. He simply becomes difficult to forget. If this hit deep, drop a like, subscribe to Relationship Psychology for more on building real emotional pull and unbreakable presence, and tell me in the comments which part of this shifted your perspective the most and what are you going to change first. I read every single one. See you in the next one.